No need to adjust your devices, folks. I do believe that the intro music changed tempo halfway through. I keep a metronome at my desk for such an occasion. Welcome back to the week that was. My name is Saeed Khan. Pleasure to host you on yet another week of News Roundup. A lot happening this past week. We are joined with a terrific panel as usual, coming from Moment Strategies and former mayoral chief of staff Alexis Wiley.
Hi.
We have AM 910 radio host Adolph Mongo. All right. Adolph is in his strong silent mode right now. We have headline Detroit, Nancy Derringer, and back from Chicago because he knows that the D is better than the C, not on a report card. Allan Lengel.
I tried to convince my mother that a D was better than a C, but she wasn't buying it.
We need some better adjectives for people like Adolph. Like, just 910 host. It doesn't
begin to encompass all
of Adolph's.
That's what I'm doing now, so okay. I don't have a problem. I can be on the island of misfit toys. I enjoy it, as I call it. So I'm having a good time. I lived a lot of lives in this media world, so this is just one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, advocates, you guys are kind of ahead on your skis on this. I didn't see Adolph complaining. And by the way, Allan, you know that you can easily turn a D into a B easier than you can change a C into anything.
I've done it.
That's true.
You used to could do it, but you can't do it anymore.
No, not anymore.
What was it in the movie War Games? I mean, it was sort of this proto-computer hacking thing where he was able to find the password for the school system, and Matthew Broderick changed all of his grades well before he then almost launched the planet into thermonuclear war. So wow. There you go.
If I could have only figured that out.
People feverishly by the mailbox intercepting the report cards. Well, we had yet another mass shooting in the United States, the 56th of the year so far. In Buffalo, an 18-year-old by the name of Peyton Gendron goes into a supermarket in a predominantly Black American area. In the aftermath, 10 are killed and 3 are wounded. He was apprehended in one piece and was brought in for arraignment, where he pleaded guilty. And here we are yet again in America with what is going on. So a lot to unpack, not only in the incident itself, but with the inevitable politics and the social commentary around it. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. This should tell us something, that if this mass murder was Black and was staking out all white, predominantly supermarkets, etc., police would have been there and would have questioned them and probably would have stopped it. We look at what happened in Oxford. White student make threats. They didn't take it seriously. Let him go back to class with a gun. That was a Black student. He would have been kicked out. I'm just looking at Rittenhouse walking down the street with a semi-automatic weapon. The police waved at him, say, "Hi, young man," and let him go. And he kills a person and wounds another one. They're going to have to start picking up these white boys, just like they do the young Black kids. If you walk down the street and see one with a backpack, I'm across the street and get away from it. The guy, Dylan Roof, went in a Black church, sang with the folks, and then shot them up. They've been getting a pass. And then you get Michael Brown shot to death over jaywalking, Eric Gardner over Lucy cigarettes. I can name it on and on and on. And yet they take these people alive. They might feed them McDonald's or Burger King. And here we are doing the same thing. We're talking about what happened. We all know Fox had a hand in this. the Tucker Carlson and all them been throwing out this hate over and over since the pandemic, before the pandemic. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to take a stand and say, okay, if we see a young white boy walking in a black neighborhood, somebody should call the police? That's why they blew up. That's why Timothy McVeigh can walk through the airport and nobody stops them. But I remember when they were stopping everybody, I got stopped every time I went to the airport. They used to put the yellow stickers on you saying, okay, check his bag. But that's what else can I say? Because it's obvious we have a problem in this country.
Or the dreaded 4 S's on the boarding pass. Yeah,
I think it is shocking that these guys are taken alive. I mean, there's no way. I agree. There's no way if somebody black was shooting it up. I mean, the cops, a black guy has a gun in his hand. They're going to kill him. Here it is. They take these guys who've just committed mass murders and they take them into custody, and they're, I agree. I mean, the issue is so much beyond, as you say. I mean, it comes from Fox, but also comes from mental illness too. I mean, it just, Nancy, I'm telling you, this country just disregards mental illness. We go around. I was driving through Pontiac the other day, saw Pontiac General Hospital, this old hospital, and I said, God, there are hospitals everywhere serving the ill, but the mentally ill, we're just we throw them back out on the street as soon as we can.
I would agree that this guy is mentally ill, but I just don't want us to deflect too much from the white supremacy, the form of mental illness known as white supremacy. Our erstwhile contributor, Mr. LaDuff, wrote, I think one of the second column that he wrote for the Detroit News, he said something along the lines of, boy, the New York Times put 9 reporters on Tucker Carlson's show to watch 1,500 hours of Tucker Carlson and came away calling him a racist. Now, that is a terrible, terrible thing to call somebody in this culture. But completely glossing over the fact that those 9 reporters who watched 1,500 hours of Tucker Carlson came away with about that many instances where he told his audience, they are coming for you, okay? I mean, mental illness can fit into that paranoia, that paranoid template very easily. I mean, once upon a time, people used to believe that there was incubus and succubus. They were demons that came into your bedroom at night and had sex with you, right? And then it became aliens. Aliens came into your bedroom at night and penetrated you with their probes and had sex with you. It's clearly some sort of form of childhood sexual abuse that people just kind of transmogrify in their brain into whatever the current model is outside of the culture. But that's what's going on here. I mean, we keep telling people that they are coming for us, and sooner or later, one of them is going to take it seriously enough and act on it. And yes, they're mentally ill, but I don't think all the hospitals in the world would have saved that guy. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I think that, like, one thing that I think, so this is one thing that was on Twitter that I think kind of applies, and I shared it on my story, but it's not lost on us that it's harder to ban the gun used in Buffalo than the books that explain why it was used. And that to me is pretty powerful, right? Yeah. Uh-huh. So there is a narrative out here, but I think, though, one thing that we do have to be thoughtful about, I think that what we should be calling for is, we need to acknowledge that in this world right now, there are a lot of sickos and a lot of people who have access to these guns. Thus, what Adolph's talking about in terms of what would have happened if you had a young black man who was sitting outside a grocery store in fatigues, he would have been stopped immediately. We cannot just assume, and I got my child, she clearly agrees with me, and she's running around. But I think that we need to have real processes in place and procedures that allow us to treat everyone equally. Like when a kid comes in and, when you think about what happened in Oxford, right? A black kid, you wouldn't even gotten to the point of having, to have any questions about the gun. You would have been expelled the minute they saw your picture, right? We got to have procedures that take out bias, that require things be handled in a specific way, and not just assume because this is some white kid that they're not going to come shoot everybody up.
I mean, out of the hundreds of people that were detained at Guantanamo Bay, I don't know if any of them got out because they were found to be mentally ill. I think there was a presumption that Al-Qaeda was stone cold sane. And it seems as though that presumption operates for just about every demographic except one. I mean, I also have to question, has anyone checked in on the mental well-being of the 9 reporters having to sit through 1,500 hours of Tucker Carlson?
They're all in therapy now.
Oh, they must be. But I mean, I think the point, Adolph, that you're making is an important one, that the last time I checked in the spring collection of Tommy Hilfiger, body armor camo was not part of the collection. I mean, here you see somebody who's able to walk in with impunity with all this, and apparently he was surveilling this supermarket. He obviously did his due diligence, driving 3 hours to find a place that would fit the demographic that he was targeting. The idea that there was a white customer, or I think a manager, whom he just simply lowered his gun and moved on to a target that he wanted to acquire. Is this really about the fact that there is a kind of willful ignorance about something that the federal government has been reporting at least since 2009, that domestic terrorism involving white supremacists is not only real, not only a clear and present danger, but the priority? But then the fact that the Republicans simply shut that down 13 years ago.
Yeah,
but it's been real. It's been real since after the Civil War. White supremacy, during Reconstruction, during the turn of the century, during the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Listen, white supremacy has ruled certain parts of this country, and whatever you want to call it, it's been there. What did it take? 150 years before they even passed an anti-lynching bill? Just passed it. Over 100 years or so. So it's been here. It's been that. It's just that recently we've been putting a label on it, saying, okay, we used to call it the Klan, but it's beyond the Klan. It's like the old days. It's like the whole community, the White Citizen Council. You can get postcards and you see thousands of people standing around bonfires of black men being burnt, and cutting fingers and toes and whatever else out for souvenirs. And people made lots of money sending out postcards. So it's been there. We just calling it something else, and we have refused to deal with it, and it's getting worse and worse.
Well,
Tucker Carlson.
Go ahead, Allan.
I was going to say, with the white supremacy, the domestic terrorism, it came particularly to the forefront in more modern times in 1995 with the Oklahoma bombing, where suddenly the FBI was like, holy shit, this is really, we got to take it up a notch. This is really a high priority. Then came 2001, and they said, holy shit, forget about those crazy white guys. We got, international terrorism there. It got pushed to the side. I covered, when I was in Washington at the Post, I covered a neo-Nazi rally in front of the Israeli embassy. That was in 2005, and it was still, domestic terrorism was just kind of below the radar, but then we see it's rising again. I mean, we saw the Whitmer case. We saw all the craziness that really Trump unleashed. I think that, and I hate to just blame him because it's been there all the time, but he encouraged people, and he said, he validated them and said, it's okay to be a racist. Don't let your kids shame you. Don't let your neighbors shame you. Don't let it, this person shame you. It's okay to be a racist. It's okay to hate. It's okay to have a gun. We've unleashed something now that is really, and we saw January 6th. I mean, talk about domestic terrorism,
Well, and during Oklahoma City, I mean, remember there was quite a focus on Jose Padilla because he was the one who seemed swarthy and fit the bill of what a terrorist should look like. The McVeighs and the Nichols brothers sort of were second hand. But let's focus then on this manifesto. I mean, I don't know how you spent your COVID lockdown, but I sure as hell didn't write a 180-page screed. And here he was.
This guy. He spent a lot. That was a lot of it was copy pasted from other manifestos.
Hey, I don't tell you how you do your job. Don't tell academics how we work either, Nancy. So, state secrets. But no one said we had to write it longhand. But the very idea that here he is bringing in, and I think you're right. He's copying and pasting Anders Breivik in Norway, copying and pasting the New Zealand killer at the mosque there. And thank you, Myron Watkins, our new videographer, for bringing those points up in our private chat here. But the idea that he was not just simply using Chicago Manual of Style citation, so lest he also be considered a plagiarist along with a mass murderer, but the fact that he was inspired, and these people are cross-inspired globally, and then bringing in, of course, the great replacement theory that people like Tucker Carlson, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, not only traffic, raise money for their campaigns on. I believe CPAC is looking to have its annual conference in Hungary under the auspices of Viktor Orban, another purveyor of replacement theory. So clearly this is out in the open. It's mainstreamed. It seems normalized, at least in one political party. What's going on, Alexis?
I just think that these ideas, Trump made it okay to say these things that people have thought for a long, long time, as Adolph has said. He made it okay to do that. I do believe that with people, and I know mental health, you can't just blame it all there, but I really believe that the pandemic has driven people crazy, because they've been so locked up on so many different levels. Like, I don't think this is one area where we're seeing it, but I think across the board, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of PTSD and stress that I think is leading to people becoming, I think, their worst possible selves. Not that I think there's anything better for this man, but it really is incumbent upon all of us to really, at this point, keep your head on a swivel, because you don't know, because nobody else is looking out for you. Something as basic as saying, I'm going to run out to the store right quick.
Right.
Is your last move.
Right.
I mean,
I agree with you about the pandemic. 100 years ago, we had another pandemic, and we saw the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and all the hate groups, the Black Hand, and all this stuff came during and after the flu pandemic.
Wow.
I agree. There's no question that racism comes alive when people are faced with some kind of adversity.
It's fear. It emanates from fear.
So how much do you think this is part of a moral panic that, as most demographers are now showing and indicating, that within the next 20 years, America is going to become a majority-minority country? Is this just going to intensify? I mean, is it going to be that the Tucker Carlsons and the Elise Stefaniks and others are just going to keep ginning up their base? And let's face it. I mean, Alexis, everyone was under lockdown, but only, it seems, half the population is doing this.
That's right, but I also don't want to take away that I feel like there have been so many bizarre, or maybe I'm noticing, I don't know, but I feel like so many bizarre, horrible crimes that we're seeing in a lot of different ways. I just think there's so much stress, and we've seen a rise in suicide. We've seen so many different murder suicides. I just think people are like, we have not taken time to say, what has it meant to be locked up and not, to protect ourselves, right, for the right reasons. But what's the mental toll of this? It's a lot.
People are social animals, and we seek out connection with one another. And if we can't get connection face to face, in real life, we seek it through channels like the internet. And I think that's probably a big part of this too. It's just
I was saying mental health is such a big thing that we put far too little. And I mean, look at Ethan Crumbly had told his parents, I'm having problems. He was delusional, and they blew him off. Instead, they bought him a gun.
Right. He said, I'm seeing demons.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead, he buys a gun. They buy him a gun for the same thing that this kid in New York, they bought him at age 16. They bought him a gun, a weapon, some type of rifle, a shotgun, or something like that. I mean, it's just everything. I mean, it really does not speak well of the parents. I mean, look, Ethan Crumbly's parents are not mentally healthy. It's just something that we still don't address enough, and we pay for it. And I'm not saying, and it's the white, the mentally ill are so much more susceptible to the craziness of Tucker Carlson, of the suggestions that we can stand by and say, you're full of shit. We're not going to listen to you. They're like, wow, I get a sense of belonging.
Don't
look at Sandy.
Go ahead.
Look at Sandy Hook, the young man that shot up the school, killed his mother, etc. And you still got people on the right saying it never happened. They was actors.
Alex Jones.
It was bullshit. And and people believe in that shit.
Well, one thing is that it seems like there's three different definitions of mental health out there, right? I mean, you've got the legal definition, you've got the medical definition, and then you've got the social or the cultural definition. So, I mean, those three don't seem to really be in alignment right now. But you mentioned Sandy Hook. I mean, you have Dylan Roof, who was 21 years old. You've got Kyle Rittenhouse, who was under 18. You've got Peyton Gendron, who's 18 years old. This is a young man's chaos right now. I mean, do we need to be worried about Gen Z for us Brits, Gen Z for the rest of you, and the fact that they seem to be really at the vanguard of this, for lack of better words, movement?
These are your soldiers.
Yeah, a friend of mine who had two boys has been saying this for years. He said, I applaud all of the special outreach to girls, we start very early with girls. You're good enough, it's girl power, it's blah blah blah. Every Disney movie and creation seems to have a feisty girl protagonist at its center. It's just, culturally and educationally, we're always trying to help girls, and I think that's a great thing. But don't forget boys. Because what we do with boys is my friend used to say, we put a ball in their hands and push them out in the backyard. They need more than that. And they need role models. They need encouragement. They need to be rinsed of a lot of the cultural static that they just seem to pick up like lint, about showing their emotions and sports and, their sexuality, everything. So I think you're right.
And I think, I was going to say real quickly, in schools, I think what teachers and counselors need to be catching these early on in elementary school, junior high. Adolph and I went to school together. We knew who the kids were in junior high. By junior high, we knew some of the kids who were going to be really in trouble later in life. We saw it, why can't the adults, if we're the kids who see it so easily, why can the adults not identify those people and try to intervene and try to, provide help? Am I right, Adolph?
Yeah.
What
the same people that did whatever they did in junior high was doing it after junior high.
Right.
But I think it goes back to kind of what Nancy's saying. We need to create space for young men and boys to be able to say, I'm not okay. And suddenly your manhood or your very humanity is not questioned. We have to create space where they feel they have avenues. That's why you see boys have a higher incidence of suicide. You see boys have incidents of violence, sexual, all these different things, because no one says it is okay to not feel okay. Right. And you need to create a place where you can say I'm not okay, and I'm not going to question whether you are less of a man whether you are gay, whether you are trans, whatever. We need to stop questioning. Thank you. My baby agrees. We need to stop questioning the humanity of people when they express who they are and what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Well, we need to stop the pipeline for young black men from the community to the prisons. This is what they do. You know, talking about how do they deal with some of this violence in the black community. They don't say these guys are mentally ill. They don't say they need some counseling. They don't want to talk about what kind of family structure they came from. All they say they criminals and they're thugs and they need to be taken off the streets. And so when you get somebody that Dylan Roof that shoots and kill 9 people, you get his whole story. You get the backstory. He comes from trailer trash and this and that, but you don't get that when you got a gangbanger out shooting up people's houses. A little girl dies or a little boy dies or a 15-year-old, and you never get the backstory. All you get is
they get called animals, and
yes,
nobody wants to actually look at it. And I always find it fascinating when people look at stuff like marijuana usage. Well, if they had a little bit of money, they'd probably be taking Xanax, right? But I've got to medicate and help myself through somehow. But what I do is actually illegal and makes it hard for me to get a job. What kids with money do, it's I get you help.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just we have so much to do.
So Nancy,
No,
Go ahead,
what you guys are bringing up in the schools in the city of Detroit and all, a lot of the urban centers, it's exactly it. The mental health is even worse. It's just not recognized at all, and that is just, as you say. Look, the same thing is happening in the black community and the white community. Some kids have alcoholic parents, some kids have abusive parents, some people have they're watching their dad beat up their mom. All some are being sexually molested, both in the black and the white community, and we don't recognize that.
So Nancy, I didn't actually expect to hear you be as critical of Disney as Ron DeSantis, but just to remind you
I'm not
that there are role models for men in Disney. No one hits like Gaston, watches wits like Gaston. Anyway, so I think you need to go ahead and up your repertoire of how many Disney movies you're watching. Well, speaking of something to entertain, we had another round of primaries this past week in some very crucial states. And so we have in Pennsylvania, and shout out to Fetterman, get well soon, the Democratic candidate for and now nominee for the Senate, suffered a stroke amidst the election campaign cycle. But on the Republican side, there were some really interesting races. Number one, purveyor of conspiracy theories, Doug Mastriano, won the Republican nomination for the governor of Pennsylvania. And then there's still an outstanding result when it comes to the Republican side of the Senate, particularly with Trump's endorsee, Dr. Mehmet Oz, up against a hedge fund manager, McCormick, both of whom apparently were not Pennsylvanians. They moved to the Commonwealth to run. And then, of course, we have Barnett, who was sort of this come from nowhere, not quite yet a rich strike because she didn't win, but it's gone to a recount. What does this say about Trump? After all, you have that, but his endorsee in North Carolina, Madison Cawthorn, lost. You have the person he's trying to bring down in Georgia, Governor Kemp, about 38 points ahead, although his guy, Herschel Walker.
Is it that much? Wow. Yeah. Okay. And how's Herschel Walker doing?
Herschel Walker's about 58 points ahead.
Oh my God. The idea of that guy in the Senate is terrifying.
58 points ahead in the Republican primary?
In the Republican primary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what does this say? Is this a referendum on Trump? I mean, it seems as though it's kind of all over the place. But what about anyone want to comment on any particular race?
Well, I'll say here in Michigan, I mean, the prevailing thought is that he's not doing any of these candidates, any of the Republican Party, any good here in Michigan. I mean, he's backing Matt DePerno, he's backing the Secretary of State. He's not really. I mean, I don't know. He's backed the opponent for Peter Meyer out in the western part of the state for Congress, but he's not having great influence here. It's very mixed across the country. I mean, we saw, Hawthorne or whatever, the crazy dude down in
Madison Cawthorn.
Madison Cawthorn down in North Carolina, and it didn't work. I mean,
he was targeted by his own party, though. I mean, he was absolutely those his hijinks, his video hijinks were clearly came from the Republican Party. Those didn't come from anybody on the other side.
So Mike Pence was here a couple days ago at the Lutheran High School up in Rochester Hills, shilling around with Betsy DeVos. Is this a coordinated campaign among the, and I use the term very loosely here, mainstream element of the Republican Party to kind of at least nudge Trump to the sidelines?
No, I think here's what's happening. His candidates are going to make it through every Republican primary across the country, right? The question's going to be what happens in the general, and can't his candidates build enough of a consensus, right? Or do they turn off those mainstream Republicans? I think in Michigan, you're 100% going to see that, right?
Yeah.
The candidates who made it through, and it's so bad that you've got Republicans who are saying we need to change the rules so that you no longer have the extremist of the party controlling who the nominees are, because we need the pragmatic people to actually be thinking about who can actually win, right? But they're not going to do that. And Republicans, I know, very much feel like they've lost faith in the ability of the party to actually get people who will actually be elected. So here in Michigan, they're going to be blown up. I think Republicans will be irrelevant. The party will be irrelevant for a number of years after this, until finally they're able to say, okay, Trump, you're out. Because if they don't do that, they're going to keep losing across the state of Michigan. There are going to be some states where you're going to see, he had one candidate who actually won, right? Or didn't he, like somebody in Pennsylvania or
the gubernatorial
Mastriano.
In Mastriano, that's his name, was Trump endorsed, and he won in a
We haven't seen any general. There's nobody. Right. So we don't know what's going to happen, who actually will actually win the seat, right?
Right.
But you know what? We're in trouble if we looking for a Republican Party where we rehabilitated the Bush brothers, the old man, Betsy DeVos. We longing for the days of those crazies. Yeah. So now they're not crazy. We wish we had them back. It's unbelievable, the loonies that we dealing with right now. Imagine Herschel Walker in the Senate.
Yeah.
Well, W had a moment of, I guess, unintended lucidity and a Freudian slip when he said, that madman who single-handedly started an unnecessary and illegal war in Iraq. Oops, I meant Ukraine. Wow. I'm surprised. I'm surprised Laura didn't throw a shoe at him. But the idea, though, Alexis, you're talking about here in Michigan. I mean, you've got the extremists in charge of the GOP party. I mean, you got people like Mishan Maddock. So the idea that the establishment can maybe even push back, it seems as though they've created the Frankenstein's monster themselves, and now they're fully integrated in the system.
They're the nice frat boy. They're the nice frat boy who brought a crazy girl home from the bar, had wild sex with her, and now she's showing him the positive pregnancy test. So, look, it's kind of like, this is, you made your bed, lie in it. So I'm not entirely sympathetic.
Liz Cheney is suddenly, I mean, Liz Cheney is basically a right winger, and then now she's like the most reasonable,
Right. Now she's
moderate.
Winston Churchill.
And you feel sorry for her daddy who stole somebody's heart and shot up one of his hunting buddies. So that's what this is. This is the Republican Party need to go by the way of the Whig Party. It need to just go away.
Nancy, at least the frat guy didn't bring home an incubus or a succubus.
I have some friends. I have a friend who's like a longtime Republican, Michigan Republican. He said there was a time in like the 70s, 80s where like Republicans were relevant in Michigan, and because they just couldn't win elections. Right. And he was feeling like they're headed back in that direction where they just can't win.
Well, and the reason they were irrelevant, unless I didn't live here then, but my guess would be that the Democrats had labor, and labor was much stronger then. So that was a different era. It's really going to be saying something though when they can't win after 40 years of dominating, or at least being the strong contenders on the national stage. I mean, Nolan Finley keeps writing about this, and I keep chuckling over these columns, where he's talking about how this is going to be a red wave everywhere, but in Michigan in the fall. But thank God. I mean, would you like to see Christina Caramo running the Secretary of State's office? It would be the second coming of Karen Spranger. So we don't need that.
Well, one person we don't have to worry about is perennial conspiracy theorist here in Michigan, Melissa Carone, whose ballot effort was disqualified. And in fact, there were several who were Monica Conyers, Michael Shalal in 57th House District. We've got Betty Jean Alexander, 6th Senate. So it looks like the system is pushing back on keeping some of the crazies out. I mean, I don't know. Melissa Carone was just sort of driving around looking for a district where she could call home.
Melissa Carone is not giving up. She claims she's still fighting it. She's certainly still fundraising. I'm on her fundraising email list. And
she was bounced twice.
She's
once for the House. Once for a House seat, and then she looked at another district for the Senate seat, and she was bounced for that. And it's interesting, Monica Conyers. I mean, the law is pretty clear. I think there may be a cap, and correct me if I'm wrong. At least 20 years you cannot run for local office, particularly if you're convicted of a felony involving corruption in a public office or.
But you can run for Congress. You can run for the Senate. Absolutely. You can hold a federal office, which is
hilarious.
Listen.
And Nancy, out in your neck of the woods, you got Alberta Tinsley Talabi, who was also disqualified on the ballot in the 3rd Senate district.
There were quite a few. So it was. There were quite a few candidates.
What's his name? Tim Killeen.
Yep.
Tim Killeen.
He was bounced.
Yeah, the county commissioner.
He's been on the commission for decades.
I know. It
could happen to a nicer guy.
What happened?
So my understanding, and I'm pulling up the letter now that was sent to me. It's always funny when I wake up to 8 million text messages of everyone texting the same thing. So he got a letter. The letter is basically from Kathy Garrett. She says the challenge is that he had outstanding amended campaign finance statements at the time he filed his affidavit of identity. After reviewing the filed challenge, the response provided by Mr. Killeen, blah, blah, blah. There's all sorts of other stuff that these are still outstanding. So his 2013 annual campaign finance statement and 2014 pre-primary campaign finance statements as required in numerous error omission notices, the last being issued on September 5th, 2015, are still outstanding. Therefore, the challenge is upheld per Kathy Garrett, Wayne County Clerk.
Wow, did that break today? I hadn't even heard that.
No, I got it on Wednesday night at 9.
God, I need to read these stories more.
Which is great for anybody who's running in that
would be my district. So
my district too.
Yeah. There we
So
go.
there's more to this, and I may be behind. I thought it was weird that it got no news, but it was texted everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Shalal's DQ happened because he forgot to check the box saying that he was a U.S. citizen. I'm like, bro. I mean, I can relate to this. With a name like ours, that's the first thing you check off.
Well, guys, the other thing that we also have to be watching is the Board of Canvassers meeting next week, where we're going to see what happens with all these Republicans.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Chief Craig may not make it.
And while we're not giving anything away for the plot for next week, stay tuned for next week, because definitely we're hoping that we can go ahead.
You're going to have a lot to talk about next Friday.
That's where we're going to have a lot to talk about.
That's when we're going to be spilling it.
That's right. No more incubi, no more succubi, and yeah.
You really fixated on that, didn't you?
You know, that's like living rent free in my head now, Nancy. And let's put it
amazing. It was kind of amazing.
Let's put it this way: I'm not going to say anything about how my high school years were, but that's because there was a non-disclosure agreement with them. So look, man, I went to school in Lapeer. I couldn't give it away on 7th Avenue, so. As Mick would say. Well, a little closer to home in Detroit, we've got some issues with our hospitals. Looks like 2 DMC hospitals were cited for violations of federal health standards. Sinai Grace and Receiving were marked for inadequate care, improper feeding, lack of nurse supervision, or even responsiveness to patient complaints. One of the things that the Metro Detroit area has is quite a bit of healthcare networking between some of the big guys like Beaumont and Henry Ford, and then you have DMC. Are we now starting to see, like other infrastructure, some real fault lines happening here, Alexis?
I think what we're seeing at DMC is something we should be watching deeply, because it is very scary that a hospital that serves so many in Detroit, and so many people who are struggling with poverty, with violent, all these different issues. We need a hospital system that's actually strong, and for DMC to be in just the position that it's in is just terrible. I mean, I know people who say they won't go to DMC, right? Despite the fact that, like, if something terrible, like if you have a traumatic incident, like a horrible accident, or God forbid a gunshot wound or whatever, DMC has the finest doctors in the area for real trauma. But sadly, the way the hospital works, people talk about just how long they wait, and really the issues around not enough nurses, which is a national issue, but it seems like everything nationally is exacerbated there. So it should worry us deeply. Thank God for Henry Ford. Thank God for Ascension St. John. But I think there's something we got to keep an eye on, because quality of care in the city is slipping, and we need it most.
You know, well, that's not a new issue. Detroit Receiving has been. Detroit Receiving, as you say, is one of the best trauma centers around. I mean, it's probably they have these doctors have so much experience with trauma and repairing people with gunshots and car accidents and all that kind of stuff. But that being said, and then we talk about Sinai Grace, which has been having problems for a long, long time. Some of it came more to the surface during the pandemic. We realized how horrific it is. But what we're seeing, I mean, look, we saw in Beaumont, and we did extensive coverage of Beaumont, where the CEO was a total whore who was just draining that nonprofit. He accumulated over $3 billion in surplus and was laying off people when they had a surplus there. That's a nonprofit. Now we see DMC, which is a profit. And what we're seeing is there's so much cost savings going on, and the CEOs are getting away with murder and a lot. I don't know that much about the DMC CEO, but I do know at Beaumont, the CEO was just his salary just kept going up while they were laying off, while the care was going down. But I know a doctor at DMC who told me, and who's a really fine doctor, who said I wouldn't even go to DMC for care.
There's people who say they rather take them to a funeral home, take them to Swanson's, than to take them to Sinai Grace. And that might sound funny, but that's the real issue. That the how they treat people. Listen, they don't treat people right. They treat everybody like they're homeless, regardless. If you come in there, you got issues. They have they got security issues. They got cleanliness issues. They got all kind of issues. Nobody wants to go there.
Sinai used to be the best hospital in the city.
But it's 3 hospitals now, Allan. What is it? Mark Carmel, Grace, and Sinai. They all merged. Now it's only one. And if you ever go to the ER, you would think you wouldn't believe it. You would not believe the people using it as a doctor's office. They don't have a primary doctor. Right. It's just bad.
They go for a toothache. People go to,
But is that more a function of poverty and not having access to a primary care physician like others would, where you might have, like, a lot of the doctors who used to be in the city don't even practice here anymore.
Right.
Well, it's not only PCPs. I mean, you also, unlike the suburbs, don't really have urgent care facilities. That's something that if you were to go to almost any street corner now in the northern suburbs, it's like CVS, Beaumont Urgent Care, Walgreens, Beaumont Urgent Care. It's like gas stations. Whichever ones aren't giving you gas are treating you for gas. Yeah. So you've got that as a phenomenon. But in the city of Detroit, and what's interesting is I think this then dovetails with what we were talking about regarding Buffalo, food apartheid. I mean, we have to wonder if it's any coincidence that not only is there not good primary care health access, you don't really have chain grocery stores in many of these inner city areas.
Because you got an embargo. You got an embargo on Black community. Kroger won't step into the city of Detroit. They'll build around the borders. When these folks was marching for Black Lives Matters and all this other stuff in Detroit, I asked a few, I say, you need to be putting these corporations like Kroger on blast. Why they not coming into the city? Why do the only Krogers we ever see is right there on the borders, and they're not very good.
Trader Joe's. I did a column on Trader Joe's.
We talk about grocery stores in the city. We also have Parkway. Parkway is a great store on the east side. You got Mike's on the west side. We don't have Kroger. You got Meijer. We've got a few others that are looking at doing potentially.
But I understand that, Alexis. But you got 4 Krogers in a city like Troy. You got 3 or 5 Krogers in these little areas. I'm just telling you.
2 Krogers close to each other. I mean, it's right.
Like Starbucks.
I don't like Kroger like that because
I did a column years ago about Trader Joe's. I said Trader Joe's, Whole Foods came in. I think, as far as I can tell, Whole Foods is doing fantastic, and it's always crowded. It's doing
in the country, my understanding.
Yeah, they do a very brisk business. And I did a column about Trader Joe's saying, hey, you would do fantastic here. I called them up and they said, we have no plans to go into Detroit. And I said, why? I said, you would do fantastic. You're cheaper than Whole Foods. Whole Foods is doing fantastic. You would even do better. We see, Trader Joe's in Grosse Pointe. We see Trader Joe's in Royal Oak, in Bloomfield Township. They won't come into the city.
They still, the Grosse Pointe Trader Joe's are from East English Village anyway. I see a lot of Detroiters in there. Yeah. And I'm not
so they can get the folks. They don't have to come in the city.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it used to be that there would be franchise rules. Like I know McDonald's used to say, well, we're not going to have 2 McDonald's within, say, 2 miles of each other. But at the same time, there were 850 McDonald's in Russia there since 1990. But McDonald's has just announced, do svidaniya, they're going to be pulling out of Russia I think that 84% stake in ownership in all of the McDonald's there. But they're going ahead and selling it to a private entity over there. But they are washing their hands clean of Russia as a result of the Ukraine crisis. Now, personally, I would think that if you're going to sanction a country, it would be more punitive to keep the McDonald's in, because that's going to lower the life expectancy. But, you know, that's just me. Do you think, yeah.
People go to
Nancy.
Moscow, the McDonald's in Moscow, because it's cheap and it's clean, and they know they're going to get decent food there. I mean, it's not, you know, by our standards, it's not great, but if you are a lower income person in Moscow, that's going to be a pretty safe go-to. Don't you remember when they first opened?
Busy mom.
A busy mom, yeah.
Get the kid French fries.
Yeah. Do you remember when they first opened there and people were taking home the styrofoam clamshells that the burgers came in and washing them out and keeping them at home for like home use? So
when the first one opened, it shattered the records for single day sales.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it's like it was like when the first Panera opened in Fort Wayne, Indiana, people acted like it was, you know, Alice Waters had come to town, or
the first Wendy's that opened in Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. But the nowadays, you know, it's funny because I do like McDonald's French fries. I think they're outstanding. And sometimes when I am on a errand run, all I want out of life is a medium Diet Coke and some McDonald's French fries. But the one that's across the street in Grosse Pointe on Mack Avenue, you can't. I mean, it's like I could go into a bar and have 2 beers and order French fries, and they would arrive before the McDonald's French fries would. I mean,
I totally agree with you about that one.
It's part of it is I'm like, the last time we went there when we were on the road, I'm like, are they making them special order for us? I don't get it. Why is it taking so long? And part of it is the labor shortage, and they've just got this new like just in time kind of delivery system. So.
Well, I think you need to sequence it better, Nancy. And I think it's actually supposed to be not 2 beers and fries, but 2 spliffs, and then you get the fries. So I think it's what you're using there. But look, I mean, in other parts of the world, like you go to like say Pakistan or Istanbul, people go to McDonald's for date night. I mean, it is considered to be kind of in some cases upmarket. Mm-hmm. I would have liked to have gone to the one that was in the former KGB building. That would have kind of been cool, right off Pushkin Square. So now we are at that point of the show, which I know always gives Alexis the willies. So we will go ahead and let's see what it's called this week.
Whoops.
You're Schmuck. I'm thunderstruck by your arrogance and your idiocy. It really is no mystery. It's true, and you know it. You're a Schmuck.
That guy was playing an Ovation guitar, which is the one that I use. That's not a paid endorsement, but I wish if Ovation, if you're hearing me, I wouldn't mind an upgrade. Okay. Adolph, who's your Schmuck of the week?
Democratic Party. They can be the Schmuck of the week every week. If they don't have a game plan against these lunatics, man, this country is going down the drain. You might think that Whitmer and Benson and Dana Nessel got an easy way to go, but listen. I didn't think Donald Trump was going to beat Hillary Clinton. And here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. We don't take them seriously. The bottom line is that now there's Buffalo shooting. You know, with the president going to Buffalo, that's all fine and dandy. But they got to come up with some kind of game plan to deal with this, and they don't have it.
Last night there was another shooting, this time in Chicago, just 2 blocks west of the Magnificent Mile, across from Loyola's law school. 2 dead and I think 9 wounded. So yeah.
Well, for Chicago, that's the par for Chicago. unless somebody's gonna start shooting downtown where the financial district is at. But I'm telling you, this country is it's in chaos right now with this violence. And when you ignore it in one part of the country, you say let their animals kill each other in the cities. Then you get this Buffalo shooting. Then you get the shooting out in California because the guy didn't like Taiwan, so he goes in and shoots up the place. Man, we got all these copycats,
Right.
And in the Senate. Well, the Democrats don't really control the Senate because Joe Manchin, he's the power broker. Whether it's abortion, whether whatever, he goes right along with the Republicans. He should just join them because he is one of them.
But he's too moderate. For the Republican Party would purge him. They would not put up with any moderate. I was going to say, last Saturday when I was in Chicago, I was walking back to my hotel about 10:30 at night. Cops were everywhere. There was a shooting in the Loop downtown. I think a teenager was killed. There were cops everywhere. It's spilling over. And that's when it really gets scary. They're like, there's articles, oh my God, tourists are now afraid to go, downtown Chicago because there's shootings there.
Eric Zorn, who is a recently bought out columnist for the Chicago Tribune, is a friend of mine, and he has a newsletter, a Substack, and he says, a lot of this is coming from bored kids who are doing these TikTok challenges. They call them trends. We're going to start a trend where we're all going to go down to the Bean or Millennium Park or the Loop or whatever and fuck up some tourists. And that's what's happened.
Well, Chicago used to have the stockyards, so I think what they need to do is bring a whole bunch of cows back into Grant Park and do some cow tipping, because that'll go well on TikTok, and at least nobody will.
What about the cows?
What about the cows?
Save the cows.
Growing up in Lapeer, they didn't seem to complain, but that's just
put a 15-year-old kid next to a cow and see how big they are, and I think the tipping is.
They're a large animal. So okay,
good.
Alexis, since I know you don't like it being called schmuck, we can go with putz or shonda.
You know what? Okay, this week I feel like Adolph kind of got me thinking, right? So this week I do think I have a schmuck.
Wow.
My schmuck are all the people who are about to get thrown off the ballot. We're doing messing up the basic task of getting your signatures and doing the most basic thing right. Literally, no one should ever give you money ever again in the rest of your political career for not doing the most basic thing. That to me is you're out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I would actually call you and raise you and say they should have their license suspended, because I don't know if they should be operating heavy machinery.
Right.
How do you not check off a box that you're a U.S. citizen? I mean, good grief. All right.
And somebody wrote on there, instead of Democrat, they wrote democracy. They got kicked off.
Well, speaking of which, Madison Cawthorn wrote the screed in which he says, I'm fed up of the Gentile element of the Republican Party. I think he meant genteel. But basically he went ahead and put all non-Jews under the bus.
He was homeschooled. Have a heart. So.
All right. Nancy.
I always have a spare, a schmuck and a spare schmuck. But I'm gonna
brought four because I didn't know if Alexis was going to go ahead.
I'm gonna loosely link two of them and co-schmuck. Jordan Peterson, the philosopher for the common man's philosopher, and Alex Jones. Jordan Peterson, because earlier this week, I guess Sports Illustrated moved its swimsuit issue to May from February when it used to run. And they put they did one of these multiple covers things, but one of the covers was of a plus size model wearing a very tiny bikini. And Jordan Peterson took to Twitter to pronounce her not attractive. And of course, Jordan Peterson, who's kind of looks a little unwashed himself, was thoroughly roasted by Twitter, and then he took his ball and bat and went home because his widow feelings were hurt. But then Alex Jones apparently yesterday said on his show that the globalists are putting a chemical in the liners of soft drink cans that is causing men's penises to shrink. That's why genitals, I don't care if you're black or white, are a third of the size they were of a 1960s male, and sperm counts are down 96%.
That
And all I want to
explains
say
it.
is, no wonder none of these right-wing dudes can actually get laid, because one of them says, if you don't look like a supermodel on the Sports Illustrated issue, you're not attractive. The other one is openly claiming that his penis is 1/3 the size of what it would have been if he had been born a few decades earlier. And hey, who would go out with these guys? So that's me.
Hey, did he say anything about Dixie cups? I'm just asking for a friend.
That's funny.
So there.
All right. And I noticed that some of these themes have still maintained their consistency throughout the show for you, Nancy, but just...
I don't know. I must have it on my head.
Leave it to you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Allan.
I have a couple here. Our Marjorie Taylor Greene, Melissa Carone, or Marjorie Taylor Greene wannabe, Melissa Carone, who thankfully has been booted off. The last thing we need is another clown in public office. And the other one is the company, the Battle Creek company, Kellogg, which continues to operate in Russia. And one of actually still many Michigan companies are still operating in Russia. Get your shit together, Kellogg. That's my.
Hey, everybody likes Eggos, even Russians.
Are they called Rice Crisp skis over there by any chance? All right. Well, my schmuck of the week is Tucker Carlson. Not for the great replacement theory, which he peddles, which makes him really odious, dangerous, and I think really an existential threat to this republic, but because he and his wife decided to hit up Hunter Biden to try to get their son into Georgetown back in 2014. Now the son's name is Buckley Carlson, which I mean screams douchebag anyway.
I love that.
But apparently, it goes even deeper than that. That the Hunter Bidens were neighbors of the Carlsons. The wives were friends, and Tucker felt no problem going up to Hunter and saying, "Hey, listen, you've got an in with Georgetown, as well as your dad, who back then was vice president. My son is a pretty decent squash player and a pretty good fly fisherman. I think that should go ahead and compensate for drinking out of certain lined soda cans, as well as perhaps being academically mediocre." And Hunter Biden actually said, "I'll see what I can do." But then starting in 2020, Carlson apparently forgot all that, or simply just glossed over it, and began a daily or a nightly screed against Hunter Biden. So for being hypocrites and selective in their outrage, except when it comes to blatant opportunism, Tucker Carlson and Mrs. Carlson, the parents of Buckley Carlson, you're my schmuck of the week. So there we go. Is that a good one? Yeah, it was either that or this doctor from Manchester, England, named Imran Qureshi, who apparently grabbed the breast of a 21-year-old student nurse, has been exonerated now and allowed back onto the National Health Service rolls for saying that, well, it was a cultural difference and it was a mistake. I can tell you that doesn't play in Pakistan either. So I don't know what culture he's talking about. But anyways, Tucker's definitely the bigger schmuck of the week. Well, listen, thank you again for really providing some wonderful insight and depth to some very important news items here. Alexis Wiley, Adolph Mongo, Nancy Derringer, and back from Chirac, Allan Lengel.
Drive home safely.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.